Hey everyone, it's Scott Hansen from NFL Red Zone reminding you to watch Sports Ballers, the podcast that gets you caught up on everything Washington sports and beyond.
And hello, welcome into the Sports Ballers podcast. It's been a little while, but we are back. I'm Corey Puffett, your host for this evening, and I'm joined as always by Eric and Evan. It's a little bit of a distance podcast today because Evan is at home and currently home. Won't be home for too much longer. Congratulations, Evan, on the new house. And
Yes,
Eric
thank you.
is in South Carolina, Georgia. Where are you, Eric?
I'm in Hilton Head, South Carolina, and somehow it's still closer than Evan, who is in Mount Airy.
Yes, much closer.
At least closer to civilization. Eric spent the last. Were you at
South
Carowinds
Carolina.
today as well, or just yesterday?
Yes.
I was in Carowinds yesterday. We drove back to Hilton Head today, and that's where I will be until Saturday. I fly home back to beautiful Maryland at that point.
Nice. How was Carowinds?
It was excellent.
How was Fury?
I mean, that goes without saying, right? Carowinds would not be excellent if Fury was somehow not excellent. And the only way Fury wouldn't be excellent is if Fury was not operational. So,
Which one of your friends you were going to Carowinds with thought would be the case yesterday?
let's not talk about that. Like, I knew better, but it gave Greg some real bad vibes. So let's get to the sports.
All right, yes. That is why we are here. We have missed the last 2 weeks because of various scheduling conflicts. Eric and Evan, was that last week or 2 weeks ago that you were on your roller coaster marathon? It was 2 weeks ago now, right?
2 weeks
That
ago,
was
yeah.
2 weeks ago,
And
yeah.
I think last week may have been my fault.
You were busy.
It was
Yeah.
your fault.
Yeah,
Yes.
I had a bunch of stuff going on last week, and I just started cross country training again for the season, trying to defend the WCAC title. And anyway, the last time that you all heard from us, the Heat were winning the Eastern Conference Finals 3-0 against the Boston Celtics, and then they were not winning
then
3-0. It was tied 3-3, and then the Heat managed to pull it out somehow on the road court in Boston in Game 7. And then just yesterday, or 2 days ago now, the NBA Finals concluded in a 4-1 gentleman's sweep favoring the Denver Nuggets. So let's talk a little bit about all the basketball that we've missed these last 2 weeks, because there's been a lot of it.
Well, I missed all of it. So I've been, watching baseball or playing Call of Duty. But,
Well, I
took a lot of joy in watching the Celtics choke. I did see that.
Yeah,
They came all the way back, only to lose. Like, oh no.
I
Couldn't
think I
happen to a
watched
better
all but one
town.
game of the last, I guess technically 3 series, the Eastern Western Conference Finals and then the NBA Finals. But this is kind of Eric's department, so we'll start with him.
Well, I'm sure Evan got tired of me saying this, but for like an entire week, even as the NBA Finals had started, I just kept saying, I can't believe the Celtics blew Game 7 at home. It just made me so happy. Like, it was so great just seeing that happen. Like, obviously the circumstances by which how it kind of unfolded, a big part of it was Jason Tatum rolling his ankle in the first 30 seconds of the friggin' game, which clearly compromised him for the remainder of it. He wasn't the same. And, that's the moment where you hope that your soon-to-be Supermax co-star, Jaylen Brown, maybe steps up. And he stepped up to the tune of 8 turnovers, shot the ball terribly, and was just had an awful game.
Probably his worst game of the series.
And he was awful for the whole series. So it was a high bar to clear for, the worst game of the series
or
for
low
you.
bar, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah, no, I'm going to say high because I was so happy that they lost. But anyway, yeah, so that was a disaster of a game for Boston. And it wasn't just Jaylen Brown. I don't want to single him out because, I'd be happy to single him out if it was all his fault, but everybody played badly, right? Like, Al Horford couldn't find his shot pretty much the entire postseason. At this point, the Boston Celtics have to consider maybe finding somebody else. The man's going to be, I think, 37 next year. The fact that he was as good as he was last season in the postseason run was the reason they got to the NBA Finals. I mean, they don't beat the Bucks last year without Al Horford turning back the clock and being absolutely brilliant in several of the games in the middle of that series against the Bucks. And, of course, he had big games in the finals as well. He didn't provide that this playoff, and the only reason Boston made as far as they did was because they were on easy streak this year with the teams they faced. I mean, they got the Hawks in the first round, which was beneficial to them. They could have easily faced the Heat in the first round instead of in the conference finals. If the play-in goes a little bit differently, if it goes 2 seed, right? Like if the Heat had beaten the Hawks at home in the first play-in game, then Boston draws them instead of Atlanta. Atlanta's an easier matchup for obvious reasons, and they still messed around and went 6 games with them. In fact, it could have easily gone 7, but Trey ran out of gas in the second half of Game 6. And then they got the Sixers with a gimpy Embiid and just the trifecta of playoff losers. Joel Embiid is one of the biggest playoff droppers in the NBA that we've seen. James Harden has a historical reputation of not being able to deliver late in a playoff series. And, of course, they're coached by Doc Rivers. So, that loss was inevitable regardless of who was playing who and how well they were playing. The Sixers were not going to win that series.
Certainly felt inevitable, and it was.
And then the fact that the Heat got to the conference finals as the 8th seed after losing to the Hawks pretty badly, after looking like they might lose to the Bulls in the remaining play-in game, I guess you would call it the 8-9 or 8-10 or whoever, the game that decided who got the 8th seed. Then suddenly they beat the Bucks, which was insane. That was kind of where Jimmy Butler, regardless of what happened in the finals, kind of etched his name into history a little bit as an all-time playoff guy. I mean, just because he didn't win the title and didn't play the best down the stretch, that's historic stuff that he put up to vanquish the Bucks. Then they get by the Knicks, who were the Knicks. So, I mean, I don't think anybody was shocked by that. And then they pull it off against Boston. But, Celtics, sorry, better luck next year, but they better have a revamped team. They're probably, like I said, they're going to pay Jaylen Brown a bunch of money, which means that Grant Williams is not going to be around because, not only that, but Grant Williams, one of the VPs of the NBA Player Association, helped sign in this ridiculous CBA that works so hard against the players, specifically players like Grant Williams, who is a middle-class type player in the NBA. He basically screwed himself, along with CJ McCollum and all these other guys, to basically try to force the end of the quote-unquote super team era, and they didn't realize the consequences of their actions. These guys that aren't superstars are not going to be getting paid like they used to be, so he's going to have to go find employment somewhere else in all likelihood. Al Horford, like I said, who knows what his future is with the team. Marcus Smart has been talked about as a guy who could be out the door because the team needs a legitimate point guard, a true floor general. And there's talks about Bradley Beal being involved in trades. We'll get to the offseason stuff next week. I want to focus strictly on mostly the finals this week because I think the Nuggets certainly deserve their due. But Boston's got a lot to figure out, and I'll leave that at that.
Yeah. As you said, we'll talk about off-season stuff a little bit later on as we actually kind of turn away from the finals. But before we talk about the Nuggets, because we should focus on them and kind of I always say save the best for last. They're the best. They are the NBA Finals champions for the first time in city history. So we're gonna save them for last. Let's talk a little bit about the Heat. You kind of walked us through their journey to the NBA Finals. And obviously so much of it had to do with Jimmy Butler. You're dealing with, you're missing a player who you feel like, if this team was going to make a deep playoff run, he was going to have to be an essential piece, and that's Tyler Hero. He gets hurt early in the playoffs, doesn't play again for the duration. So it's really up to Jimmy Butler and Kyle Lowry, and then just a bunch of mostly undrafted guys who wound up kind of filling in the other significant minutes and shots that the team was taking through the rest of the playoffs. So Jimmy Butler steps up in a big way in those early series. He's scoring, 30, 40, 50 points a game and just taking over games. But I don't think he really had a good game after Game 2 of the Eastern Conference Finals. Like, even their Game 3 win was maybe in spite of Jimmy, if anything. Like, he was not a huge contributor to that win. He wasn't a huge contributor to the Game 7 win. And then he didn't really do anything in the finals.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. His performance definitely dropped a notch each round the playoffs went on. And, Jimmy said it, but, I'm not going to necessarily 100% agree with him on it. He got injured in the Knicks series, right? Like, he missed a game. He rolled his ankle. And, I don't care who you are or what the circumstances are. I don't know what's going on with that.
Oh, my goodness.
That didn't help at all.
No,
but at least it's a little further away. Anyway, I'm going to go do something. Actually, no, it's still going. Okay. I'm going to go remove that from the room, and I will be right back. You guys talk about whatever for like 20 seconds.
Okay. Here, we were prepared, Evan. We were prepared before the show by Eric for a disruption in the show. The disruption that we were expecting, though, had to do with food being brought in, which I think actually did just happen a few moments before that.
Maybe that's what the little chime was for.
He failed,
the dinner bell.
He failed to warn us that his computer was just going to have, what would you even call that?
His second computer.
Right, his second computer.
I don't know.
We were prepared for one distraction. We were not prepared for two.
I apologize for the unprecedented distraction because I didn't know that was going to happen.
What was that?
I knew the food delivery. That was my mom's computer. I don't know what was going on. I started doing the Dell noise or whatever.
Your mom's computer. I mean, I know it was on the bed, but still, you just chucked it.
I was so mad. Anyway, we were talking about Jimmy Butler.
Talking about Jimmy Butler and the fact that he did miss a game in that Knicks series. So you could understand if his play diminished from that point because of an injury. But it didn't, at least not immediately. Like, he still had some other good games after he came back in that Knicks series, and he had 2 good games to kick off the Boston series in Boston. And then he comes back to Miami and just forgets how to be playoff Jimmy and doesn't remember again for the rest of the playoffs.
Well, so Game 3 in the conference finals was a shellacking. Jimmy didn't really have to do anything, right?
Fair.
Like, everybody was hitting shots. The Celtics basically quit early in the third quarter. So Jimmy didn't have to be Jimmy. But, you roll an ankle. I understand what you're saying, Corey, about how he continued to play well. But, man, you get hurt. You're older. Jimmy's like 34, right? Like, he's not a spring chicken by any means. Over time, like, an injury only increases the chances of you running out of gas. And I think it was pretty clear in the finals that Jimmy ran out of gas.
Oh, yeah.
And
you're like 2 for 13 in the with 4 minutes left in the finals.
He was so bad in Game 5. Like I even said it on the chats. I said, okay, they're officially at the point where they're going to lose because of Jimmy.
Yeah.
Right. Like, maybe not the series. I think their defeat was pretty inevitable.
Oh yeah.
In a 7-game series against Denver, but that specific game with an opportunity to extend the series and get it back to Miami for a Game 6, if Jimmy plays even close to a standard that we should hold him to, they win that game, right? Like, Denver scored 94 points. They did not play particularly well offensively.
No.
And yet they still were able to come out as champions because the main star of the Miami Heat didn't bring it. And, I think it's a case of Jimmy running out of gas. But the thing is, great players don't run out of gas, right? Like, that's not something that's supposed to happen to you. And I think that there's...
Uh-oh. We also were not prepared for that
there's,
disruption.
Another interruption.
Yeah, Eric
hung
just
up
dropped
or
out
something.
of Skype.
Yeah, so I'm sure he was making a bunch of great points about Jimmy Butler, and I was totally paying attention, and not doing a bunch of other math and stuff, getting ready for our Orioles portion. Eric's back now.
This is unbelievable.
It is.
This is what happens when we don't podcast for 3 weeks and then I'm on the road. Like, this is ridiculous. But okay, so
when we go on vacation.
Again, Jimmy Butler. Again, I kind of thought coming into the playoffs, it was one of my criticisms of the Miami Heat was, I don't know, as great as Jimmy Butler is, as great as he is, and as much as I love Jimmy Butler, I always questioned, is he capable of being the lead dog for an offense on a championship level team? I wasn't sure if he had that kind of game. I always thought that he needed somebody else to kind of ease the burden a little bit. And then, of course, he does what he does against Milwaukee, and it felt like that question was answered right then and there. Of course, Jimmy's capable of being that guy. But doing it for a game here and there, or even for an entire series in the first round, that doesn't make you a champion. You've got to do it for 4 rounds. You've got to consistently be the guy that people are afraid of, and you've got to consistently show them why they're afraid of you. And Jimmy couldn't do that in basically the last half of the playoffs. I mean, like you said, Corey, great in game 1 against Boston. Honestly, game 2 wasn't that good until the end, until Grant Williams started chirping at him, because Grant Williams is a dummy, and we talked about that on here. And then Jimmy came alive and killed them.
I'll still give him credit for that game as a good game.
But like, if we're just talking about overall performance, it's fair to say that wasn't a great Jimmy game. That was a great Jimmy finish, which is what you need. But sometimes you need a little more than that, and he didn't have that against Denver. I'm curious to see what Miami does in the offseason, whether or not there's talk about them being interested in trading for Damian Lillard. There's talk about maybe them being interested in making a trade with the Wizards for Bradley Beal, which please do and give us somebody good. But
who do they have that's good to give the Wizards for Bradley Beal?
I don't know. Jimmy Butler.
Everybody.
Why would they do that?
Anybody.
They're not going to give us Jimmy or Bam, who I have to say in the finals, Bam was spectacular.
Bam actually did play well in the finals, because
so well.
He hadn't really impressed me that much through the rest of the playoffs. Like he'd have a few really good plays in every game, but then he'd also have a few really bad plays where he either was lazy on the boards or he just turned the ball over inexplicably. But during the finals, Bam was not the problem.
No. Bam did his job. He did a reasonably good job, as good of a job as you can hope, defending Nikola Jokic. He was aggressive offensively, which is one of the big criticisms I've had of Bam, is he tends to be a little bit too passive. He doesn't seem to have confidence in his game to attack mismatches. But that wasn't the case in the finals. He was going for it, I think, because he knew and he saw what everybody else saw. Jimmy didn't have it. And so Bam, as the second best player on that team, was like, I got to step up and do something. Like, even though he's mainly out there to grab rebounds and be one of the best defensive players in the NBA, and any scoring he provides, any playmaking he provides is kind of secondary, he was like, no, I got to do more than that this time. I got to step my game up. And he did, and it just wasn't enough, right? Like, it's just you can't expect one guy to carry the show, especially when it's a guy who's not really comfortable in that role in the first place.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and turn over to the Denver Nuggets. Was it 43 years that they have been in existence? Is that right?
They were an ABA team. It's hard to do you count those years as well? I don't know.
Based on what I was seeing on ESPN, I think that they were putting 43 in the lower third graphic. Regardless, more than 4 decades in the NBA. I believe that this is the longest that any team has waited to win their first title. There may be some teams that have been around longer and haven't won yet, but to have actually won a title, they waited the longest from their founding to when they won their first title. Doesn't matter. Denver Nuggets, NBA champions.
Yeah, champs, man. You can't take it away from them. And, that number matters to fans of Denver sports. It doesn't mean a damn thing to anybody that plays for the Denver Nuggets, right? Like they can only control the teams they played on. They don't
None
give
of
a
them
crap
have been
about what happened in the
have been
80s.
alive as long as the Denver Nuggets have been around.
Yeah, like they're just like, hey, we're here and we're the team now and we're great and we won the title. And obviously it starts with Nikola Jokic. He was spectacular throughout this entire playoffs. He dominated, certainly against the Lakers, which was probably the toughest matchup they had. He destroyed the Suns. And while he wasn't as dominant in this series, at least as a scorer, he was the guy that was calling all the shots the entire time. And the Heat were just overmatched. They had no chance. Even Jokic could bring his B game every night, and it wouldn't have mattered. Like the Heat picked off one game where the Nuggets just shot terribly, and that was it. Like the rest of the time, it was pretty clear.
And frankly, the Heat were a little
bit
bit lucky even to come away with that game.
Yep.
It's crazy just how well Nikola Jokic does just about everything. Like, he doesn't have very many flaws. He doesn't have very many weaknesses.
No.
He shoots the ball well from almost anywhere on the floor. Like, he's not throwing up Steph Curry threes, but he can hit them from outside the arc.
Yep.
When he is not shooting well, he passes, and he passes very well. Obviously, he has an advantage being as tall as he is, but you can't say like, oh man, if I was that tall, I'd be that great. There have been other tall players in the NBA, players who are as tall or taller than him. None of them have ever been as good a passer as Nikola Jokic is.
Well, and the thing is, passing by and large goes hand in hand with being able to create for teammates, right? Like there's a difference between just being able to throw an accurate, timely pass into see a lane. You also have to be able to draw the defense to create that opportunity. And there's just, big men don't do that, right? Like they typically get in the post and they bang with the other big guy and they waste a whole bunch of time and they usually throw up an inefficient shot. And that's why the post play has kind of vanished from the NBA. Jokic has brought it back because he's so damn efficient, right? Like he's got such good moves. His footwork is impeccable. His hands are phenomenal. His touch around the rim is crazy. Like anything that he shoots within 10 feet, if it doesn't go in, you're like, what's wrong with Jokic? Is he hurt? Like it's not just, oh, he missed a shot and move on. It's like, oh, that's weird. He always makes those. And, we saw that against the Suns, especially with DeAndre Ayton, who was desperately trying to defend him. We saw it with Anthony Davis trying to defend him one-on-one. It just did not work. And that's kind of where everything has to come from. You can't be this great distributor, this great creator without your own ability to pressure the defense. And he does that better than most people in the NBA, right? Like I showed a graphic that talks about creating advantages, and Jokic was on the list as one of the 5 or 6 guys that's the best at that. And he's a friggin' center. Like that's not something a center is typically tasked with doing. The center is usually the guy that finishes the plays. He catches the lob. He gets the ball in deep and finishes. Jokic is just like, give me the ball anywhere on the floor and I'll make something happen. And it's why he's probably the best offensive player in the NBA. And I think at this point, you've got to say he's the best player in the world, right? Like there's nobody that really has a case to compete with him. He just won the championship and he did it in dominant fashion where he got all kinds of looks. People tried different things and they still couldn't stop him.
So I have to ask this question just because I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I haven't really gone to look and see if other people are talking about this. I imagine it's being brought up somewhere, whether it's on ESPN or FS1 or whatever. But a few months ago, we're in the lead up to the MVP race. And, you make the point on the show, a point that, some other people were making, including like Nick Wright. Nick Wright made the point on Bomani Jones' show. He made it on whatever his, he's on FS1, right?
Yeah, he's got the 3:00 show on FS1.
So this point that up until this year, Nikola Jokic, back-to-back MVPs, had not gotten out of the second round of the NBA playoffs.
At least not in the years he had won. He made the conference finals.
Or at least not in the years he had won. He had not done enough to deserve a third consecutive MVP. And potentially partly because of that mentality, although certainly Embiid was really good in the regular season, and down the stretch, there were enough arguments to be made that Embiid deserved it more than Jokic. But I think some people also still felt like Jokic could have been just as deserving if it wasn't for that one big knock against him. Now that he has won the finals, and the team did it in large part because of him, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on him not getting MVP this year.
Well, again, this was a case of you're not going to make a fool out of me, right? If you get the third MVP in a row and then you don't do what you just did and you lose in the second round or you lose in the conference finals to the Lakers, it's going to look really bad. You won 3 straight MVPs. You never won a championship. That's nuts. Like that's simply unprecedented. I don't have any issue with what I said about the MVP. I've always been a Jokic guy. I've always said that he's great. I never questioned his ability to do what he just did. But I do know that, again, when people have gone out of their way historically to not award somebody 3 straight MVPs, except in the most extenuating of circumstances, Jokic was not an extenuating circumstance coming like at the end of the regular season. He absolutely was not that. And I thought that Embiid's regular season performance was certainly deserving of MVP. Like, it's not like Jokic just got absolutely snubbed. Embiid had a case. Like, it's not – I wouldn't – there's no way in hell I would have said, don't give Jokic the MVP award if he was the only guy that deserved the MVP award. That would have been ridiculous. And even with what I said about winning 3 straight and not doing anything to back it up in the postseason would have looked bad, at the point, you got to vote for the guy if he's the guy. And this year, I just didn't think he was necessarily the guy. Like, I thought that this is a situation where the more you win the award, the more you have to prove. And I didn't think that he had proven that he was warranted a 3rd straight, given what had happened after those 2 MVPs and given what Embiid had done during the regular season. Doesn't mean I think that Embiid was better as a better player than him overall, but I did think that Embiid had a better season. I don't think that's unfair to say. Embiid was the leading scorer in the NBA. Embiid's team walloped Jokic's team head-to-head when they met, and Embiid took it to Jokic in that game. And Embiid's a much better defender, and Jokic slacked off the last month of the season. You don't get to slack off the last month of the season and win the MVP. It just doesn't work that way, especially not for your 3rd in a row. But that has absolutely nothing to do with how I feel about Jokic as a player.
Fair enough. Talk about Jamal Murray a little bit. You know, a couple of years ago in the bubble, Murray was really good, amazing. I'm sitting here thinking he might be the best point guard in the league, not named Stephen Curry at that point. And then he just can't stay healthy. He spent the next 2 seasons dealing with a multitude of injuries. He injured his knee, I believe, first. Was it an ACL tear?
He really only had one injury, to be fair to him. He tore his ACL in April of 2021 against Golden State. And that injury still pisses me off because, I know it wasn't the Warriors' fault, but I kind of blame them for it. Not because they did anything dirty or suspect to injure him, but because the game was over. The Warriors were clubbing the Nuggets, and then they started goofing off at the end and let the Nuggets back in it. So the Nuggets starters kept playing real hard, including Jamal Murray, and he was going super hard in the paint with 40 seconds left, and he landed funny and tore his ACL, and I was like, he shouldn't even have been in the game at this point. The game was over. The Warriors But regardless, that he had that injury. He missed all of 2022.
Yep.
He came back this year and initially was, he looked like a guy who was coming off an ACL tear. He didn't quite have it. And it worried me, as it worries everybody, when you see somebody coming off of that injury and seeing them not quite be what they used to be. And you have to wonder in the back of your head, are they ever going to get there?
Right.
Well, he didn't make the All-Star team because he wasn't there yet. He didn't make an All-NBA team because he wasn't there yet by the end of the season. But damn it, in the playoffs, he was back, baby. He was absolutely cooking. And, there are issues that I have with Murray's game at times. I'm not going to pretend like he's a perfect player. I'm certainly not going to say he's the second best point guard in the league at this point. I don't think you would either, Corey.
No.
But this playoffs, I tweeted something during the Suns series. I think it was in Game 2 when he was really struggling. And I kind of said, man, Jamal Murray is your second best player on a championship contender. That worries me because he had inconsistency issues with his scoring. He wasn't always the most efficient shot taker. or shot maker. And I was like, you need this to be consistent if you're going to win. And even in this playoff run, he wasn't super consistent, right? Like the league average true shooting percentage this year was 58%, which, to be clear, as a side note, is obnoxiously high, and it should not be that high. And the NBA needs to let the defenses do a little more to stop that. But that is a topic for another day. We can get into that in the offseason. But I looked up Murray's game log. He played 20 playoff games, as the Nuggets did. And he had 9 games where he was above that threshold. He was above 58% true shooting. He had 9 games where he was below that number, and he had 2 that he shot exactly 58%. So shooting-wise, his numbers look kind of average. But when he did it was big. The Nuggets had, I think, 5 or 6 games that were where they won by single digits, and in all but one of them, Murray was an above-average shooter for the day. He was a part of why they won. The only exception, interestingly enough, was Game 5 of the NBA Finals, where he didn't shoot well, but it didn't matter because the Heat were cooked. Like, so against the Lakers, every game, he was north of 62% true shooting. He was dominant the whole series, and regardless of how many games the series went, that was the Nuggets' toughest series. Like, the Lakers were the toughest opponent they had. Every game was close. Every game, it looked like the Lakers at some point could win. Whereas the Suns, they won their 2 home games, but they got their ass kicked in the other 4. Like, they were never going to actually beat the Nuggets at home. And it was a miracle that they held on at home the 2 games that they had.
Yep.
So, Murray showed up when it mattered. Like, he didn't have a great finals, and it didn't matter then, but he was brilliant when he absolutely had to be. And that's all you need from a guy like that, especially when you've got Jokic on your team. This guy just has to come and light it up in a key game once a series, and he usually did it twice a series.
Yeah. What did you think about some of their role players? I mean, Michael Porter Jr. had some solid games in the playoffs, including in the finals. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope was pretty solid as a role player. Who do you think was the best player behind Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray in this playoffs for the Denver Nuggets?
I mean, it's tough to say because they each kind of had their moments. But I think this is a shout out to the Nuggets front office, right? Like the Nuggets in 2022 or 2021, when Murray got hurt and missed the playoffs, they had Jokic, and Porter was healthy for that playoff run as well. But they also had Monty Morris and Will Barton and some other guys that just weren't really that good. And then they rolled into the 2022 season with no Murray, and then Porter was hurt that whole season as well. And they still had most of those same guys. And they understood that, we weren't going to win anything without Murray and Porter, but we still needed to see something from these role players that we had on the team, and we didn't see what we needed to see, even in a losing effort. So they got rid of them. They dialed up the most friendly opportunity you'll have, the Washington Wizards, and they said, hey, you want Monte Morris and you want Will Barton and give us Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, a proven championship role player with the Lakers from 2020, a guy who plays good defense and can hit threes? And the Nuggets were like, sure, let's do it.
The Wizards were like, sure.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, the Nuggets were like, sure, that was their idea. And at least I hope it was their idea. I hope it wasn't the Wizards' idea. It could have easily been the other way around. It could have easily been. But so that happened. They signed Bruce Brown, who was tremendous in the playoffs last year for the Nets, which sounds crazy because they got swept by the Celtics. But Bruce Brown was the reason why all the games were close. He was incredible. And for whatever reason, the brain trust over there, namely KD and Kyrie, didn't want to keep him. So the Nuggets picked him up, and he was awesome. He might be the guy that I would say was the most important role player. But also, I got to give the Nuggets credit again with Aaron Gordon, who a lot of people have compared him to Andrew Wiggins in this playoffs, like sort of what Wiggins did with the Warriors last year, where he was on the Magic for a while and was very talented, won dunk contests, got snubbed on another dunk contest. He's awesome, but the Magic were losers, and so they didn't win anything. And I kind of disagree with the comparison just because Aaron Gordon wasn't facing bust allegations like Andrew Wiggins was. Like, he wasn't the number 1 overall pick. He didn't have the same baggage that Wiggins had coming out of Minnesota. But it is a similar vibe in that the Nuggets traded for him in 2021, just like the Warriors traded for Wiggins in 2020. And then he has a full season to get acclimated, but a key player is hurt, so they're not really a championship contender. But the Nuggets, again, they looked at what Aaron Gordon was doing, what he was capable of doing, and they understood we are asking him at this point to do more than we were expecting him to do. We were demanding that he basically be our second best offensive player with no Murray and no Porter, which is not something that you should count on Aaron Gordon for. We want him to be a fourth or fifth option and provide energy and defense and rebounding. And he finally got the opportunity to live in that role, and he killed it, right? Like, he was excellent in game one of this series. He played awesome defense throughout the entire playoff run, and he hit some key shots. Like, he's a big part of the reason they won the title too, and they did it in dominant fashion. Like, they had like a 6 or 7 man rotation. Everybody was great. So, if you do that, you're going to have a real good chance to win a championship.
You mentioned that the Lakers series was the toughest one for the Nuggets, and it's interesting. There was one move that was made at the trade deadline that I think may have flipped that series, because I think the Lakers would have absolutely won if they still had Thomas Bryant.
Leave Thomas Bryant alone. He's my boy. He's a former Wizard and a former Indiana Hoosier, I should say. Was a one and done in Indiana, and he came to College Park and he got shut down. So there's that. Shout out to Jalen Smith. But yeah, Thomas Bryant. I also need to shout out my guy Ish Smith. Ish Smith was a part of the Caldwell Pope trade. He was a throw-in. Ish played on 13 teams in 13 years. He had multiple stops with the Wizards, and my boy just got his first ring. So shout out to him.
Oh, congrats to him.
Yeah, Evan seems to be a little taken aback by the name Ish. Don't worry, Evan. Charles Barkley was as well. He said on Inside the NBA, what kind of mother names their son Ish? And, at which point
Ish is an awesome name. There's a whole side story in the first Last of Us video game about a guy named Ish.
Yes, and it is short for Ishmael, as Evan said. So that's a normal name. So relax, Chuck. But yeah, that's what I've got on Thomas Bryant, who very good, Corey. I'm glad you brought him up, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention Mike Malone. He's a guy that's been coaching the Nuggets for 8 years. When the Nuggets were having their late season swoon and people were predicting doom and gloom for the Nuggets in the playoffs, there was questions about whether or not he would keep his job. Well, I think he's good. Right?
I think he's good too.
I appreciated what he did. I've got, again, you can criticize any player or coach for something somewhere down the line, except for Spo apparently. But Malone had some moments where I was like, what the hell are you doing? You need to make an adjustment. But there were certain things that he did that I really appreciated. Number one, he was obnoxiously defensive of his team, like to the point where people were getting defensive of his defensiveness. And, he kept saying that, during the Lakers series, everybody's talking about the Lakers the whole time. Everybody wants to talk about how, we won game one, but they figured us out and the series is over. We're going to lose. And he was right. It was ridiculous. And everybody kind of overlooked Nikola Jokic, right? Like we talked ad nauseum about the MVP, and I've made my statements about it. But man, people got really nasty with their takes about Jokic. Some of the language used towards him, the fact that Stephen A. Smith referring to him as a tub of lard on TV. I'm just like, that's
a tub of lard. I think you're
right?
mixing him up with the other white European guy, Luka Doncic. He looks like a tub of lard out there.
Luka is fat, right? Like Jokic, as big and as burly as he is, I've never really looked at him in the last few years and thought, yeah, he looks fat. He just looks big and looks scary too, right? Like I don't want to mess with him or his brothers. But yeah, like I thought that some of the ways that the NBA has covered, or the NBA media, I should say, has covered the Nuggets this year has been lacking. Again, this is going to sound ridiculous as a Embiid should have won the MVP guy, but that doesn't change the fact that Jokic has been, for the last 3 years at least, certainly a top 3 player in the NBA, and has staked, in my opinion, unequivocal claim to the best player in the world. And people are going to have to start accepting that beyond just best player in the world status, we're talking about an all-time great here at work, right? Like, I don't think anybody would deny that Giannis Antetokounmpo is an all-time great that is working through, the meat of his prime right now. But Jokic is just as accomplished. They're both two-time MVPs. They've both led their team to championships. They're both 28 years old. Like, yeah, Giannis might have more defensive accolades. He might have a couple more All-NBAs. But effectively, the high-level awards and accolades and achievements that you can have in the NBA, Jokic and Giannis are basically neck and neck. And if you were to ask me who's more likely to win another championship or who's more likely to win another MVP or both, I'm going to say it's Jokic right now over Giannis, especially going into next season where we talked about the whole MVP race this year. At this point, Jokic has the wind at his back, right? He's a defending champion. He's probably going to come back and put up the same crazy numbers. The advanced metrics are going to say he's great. The Nuggets are going to be one of the best teams in the league. He's my favorite to win the MVP next year, and we'll see if they can repeat. I think they're in a pretty darn good position to make a run at it. But if he does that, then what are you going to do with him? You got to start talking about top 15, top 10, getting close. And people just have to wrap their heads around the fact that this guy that literally, like Lisa Salter said, I slept on this guy. When you're a friggin' media member who has cable TV, I presume, and could watch Nuggets games when they're on national TV, which they have been for a while, it's just people are going to have to get used to this. And you've already started to see people making ridiculous defenses or being defiant about it. And I'm just like, accept that this guy is who he is, and this is what he does, and it kicks ass.
Last question before we move off the NBA. Is Denver officially off the list of NBA Siberia locations?
Evan was the one that has always referred to them as NBA Siberia, so he's going to have to take that one.
All right, Evan, question for you then. We haven't really.
Perfect excuse for me to eat
You haven't got a
dinner,
chance to. Yeah,
listening.
Eric can finally take a bite of his chicken. It's probably cold by now.
It can't be worse than that chicken he sent us a picture of from some event he was at.
No, this is definitely better.
Okay. I mean, if it's edible, then it's better. I mean, Denver, they're out of NBA Siberia now because they're relevant, right? Like, they just won the championship. I imagine they have to be favored for next year, but gonna have to check the old FanDuel for that one. But I mean, they have star players. They just won. They're not NBA Siberia anymore. I guess when they weren't winning, they definitely were. They seemed irrelevant to me. But NBA Siberia now, I mean, Minnesota Timberwolves, Detroit Pistons,
Utah Jazz.
Yeah. What about
Pistons?
Yeah.
Detroit Pistons won 3 championships.
Okay.
I guess Evan is on the "What have you done for me lately?"
Yeah. Well, what have you done for me lately? Ask your boy Stan Van about how that's going.
Yeah, I will. But by the way, okay,
close.
Let me ask you this, though. Are the Chicago Bulls NBA Siberia?
Are the Washington Wizards NBA
Yes.
Siberia?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Gracious.
But the Bulls,
Yeah,
though.
the Wizards. Yeah.
Bulls?
Irrelevant. Siberia, definitely.
Okay, so we are qualifying it as basically you haven't done squat in X amount of years.
So Orlando's on the list.
Oh, gotta be.
Oh my God. Yeah.
They haven't done anything ever. Like, they made 2 finals.
The New York Knicks. How do you
feel like
call
the Knicks
anything
can
in
never
New
be
York City Siberia?
everybody's
But if we're
complaint
going off of that
about
definition, they have to be. All right,
But they're
let's-
also in the news all the time.
Let's
Yeah.
move off of the NBA. Congratulations to the Nuggets. Congratulations to the Heat as well. Pretty impressive to see an 8 seed make it all the way to the finals. Something we do not see very often. We've only seen it one other time, I believe, in history. The New York Knicks, speaking of, did it? Is that it? I told you I was going to ask you something as you were chewing.
Yeah, they did it, and that was in a lockout season, so,
Yeah.
we can make excuses for why that doesn't count, even though that's nonsense. It definitely counts.
All right, so let's talk about some other stuff. See, Evan is sort of doing a little bit of writing up for the Orioles. We'll come to Major League Baseball in just a minute, but first, The other major sport, I guess, in North America had their championship also end 4-1, also with a team from Florida, an 8 seed in their bracket, losing in the finals. The Vegas Golden Knights defeated the Florida Panthers 4-1 to win their first Stanley Cup. So another first, along with Denver. And the last game, a football score, 3 field goals to 1. 9-3? Who gives up 9 goals in a hockey game, Eric?
A team that quit? I don't know.
Apparently.
Maybe they were like, hey, we're not going to win the cup, but our season's about to end in Las Vegas, so let's get it over with.
Party time.
Yeah, 9-3. Jonathan Marchessault, I hope I'm pronouncing that name correctly.
Close enough. Marchessault, yeah, that works. Yeah.
Okay. He won the Connie Smith Award.
Oh, my God.
I don't know these things.
Even I know that.
Even Evan knows that because it's the Stanley
Let's
Cup.
do that hockey, over here. Oh, man.
I prefer Stanley's Cup.
That is a very depressing but good episode.
It is.
Yes, that happened. The Conn Smythe Award was awarded to Jonathan Marchessault, so there you go. I put this in there just because there's a little bit of a Caps connection here, and it's not just because the Caps beat them the last time they were in the Stanley Cup Finals.
They did.
That's part of it. The Golden Knights were, I think, established in 2017,
Yes.
so this is their 6th season in existence, so obviously significantly less wait time for their first championship than the Denver Nuggets. But still kind of a little bit worrisome because their general manager, George McPhee, is the former Capitals general manager who basically put together the core of the team that existed back in the mid-2000s up until like 2015 or so, like the Ovechkin, Backstrom era Capitals. So kind of the guy that built the teams that got us excited and gave us hope that the Caps could win a championship. He was not the general manager when the Capitals won the Stanley Cup. He was, in fact, the general manager of the Vegas Golden Knights when the Caps beat the Golden Knights for the Stanley Cup. And it looked a little bit like history might be repeating itself because McPhee's first year with the Capitals was 1998. And for the historically rounded people, understand what happened in 1998 for the Washington Capitals. They went to the Stanley Cup Finals, and they lost to the Detroit Red Wings in a sweep. And so a lot of people were excited, though, because obviously you make the finals, and you're figuring, okay, we're going to be,
we're going to be competitive for a while.
Yeah, and then the Capitals never got back. They had quite a few playoff exits, premature, many would say, choking dogs, some others, like Kornheiser would say in the Washington Post frequently.
And he was right.
I would agree with him.
Absolutely. Mr. Tony knows all. But then I was kind of feeling like the same thing's happening to McPhee out there in Vegas, right? Like they get to the Cup Finals, and now they're disappointing every year in the playoffs. And then they didn't. They got it done. They beat the crap out of pretty much everybody in their way, including the Florida Panthers in the finals. I think they had a couple of competitive games. The Panthers obviously won Game 3 to make the series potentially competitive, but Vegas came back and won Game 4 3-2, and then obviously whooped the Panthers in Game 5. So shout out to them. Expansion franchise that was so good that they kind of had to change the rules for the Kraken as an expansion franchise because they were like, we let the Knights get too much good stuff. So they kind of limited the expansion draft so they wouldn't be able to just, put together this awesome team. But it wasn't just that. Like the Knights made a bunch of trades after the expansion draft to really build that team out. And it resulted in an immediate contender that's been present for 6 years now. So, shout out to George McPhee. Shout out to the Golden Knights for being able to make that happen. And shout out to the NHL for having another expansion team from a warm weather city being an interesting hockey town. Like that, this is the dumbest idea ever. Putting teams in places like Dallas or Phoenix, which unfortunately is not working out right now, or LA or
Las Vegas,
Atlanta,
literally the
Tampa,
middle of the desert.
Or Sunrise, Florida, not even Miami. And yet it seems to be working. The game's growing, and the league is having a lot of success. So you got to give them credit for that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Evan, you have in here for the Ravens that minicamp is a thing that is happening. Anything significant to report from Ravens camp?
No.
I mean, the only thing you would have to report is somebody had a devastating injury, so it's a good thing.
I mean, do you want to talk about Lamar Jackson's balls? Because Mark Andrews just can't get enough of how good his balls are. Apparently, he's throwing some really good balls.
I don't want to talk about that.
I keep seeing that quote. I'm just like, he knows exactly what he's doing. Like, come on, Mark Andrews.
You've been hanging around high schoolers too much, Corey, with this sophomoric humor right here.
It is sophomoric. And I would think that Mark Andrews would have grown past that by now, but no, apparently not.
He's a football player. Come on, man.
Fair.
I mean, he's not one of the guys that peaked in high school, but if you play football, you pretty much signed up for that life as a guy who peaked in high school, unless you're one of the few exceptions that actually gets to play in the NFL.
Your point?
So that's just who he is.
Oh, okay. All right. Before we go to Major League Baseball, we do actually have a mailbag question this week. My wife, Rashonda, would like to know what we think about the PGA Tour merging with Live Golf. Live Golf, for anybody who maybe doesn't know, is the Saudi Arabian-backed golf league that formed, I guess, 2 years ago now. The LIV stands for 54, which is both the number of strokes that you would take on a 72-hole golf course or a 72-par golf course if you birdie every shot. It is also the number of holes that you're supposed to play in a regulation game when you're playing the Live Golf Tour.
Yeah, because they only play 3 rounds.
Yeah, because they only play 3 rounds, exactly. Live Golf, when it was created, basically was just throwing money at other golfers. They hired a former professional golfer as their, I think he's the CEO. They were throwing out contracts at a lot of PGA players, including reported contract offer between $700 and $800 million to Tiger Woods, which Tiger Woods famously turned down. Several other PGA players, though, accepted smaller but still very substantial offers from Live Golf. And the PGA Tour basically was like, yeah, you guys are dead to us now. You don't exist. As far as we're concerned, you basically never golfed for the PGA Tour. You're not welcome to ever come back. You will never be able to become members again if you do this. And some players were like, well, I'm going to follow the money. And other players were like, I don't feel good about this. This is blood money or whatever. And, a lot of people were sending letters thanking the PGA Tour golfers who didn't accept the money because it was the patriotic and right thing to do. But then about a week ago, we find out that the PGA Tour is, along with the PGA European Tour, are entering an agreement with Live Golf where they will still operate their respective tours more or less individually. They'll set the rules and everything for their tours, but they are going to be essentially pooling their finances, and the finances will all be handled by the organization that runs Live Golf. So the PGA Tour basically did about face and said, all that stuff that we said about how you guys are dead to us if you accept this money? Well, that was just because we didn't want you to have that money. We want that money for ourselves. And now that PGA has it, I guess they're happy. So that's sort of the, in a nutshell, version of what happened. And Rashonda would like to know what we think about it. So I guess maybe start with Eric. What are your thoughts?
Well, you got to start with me because Evan said BRB. So
perfect.
I don't know if he's back, but he wasn't there like about a minute ago. So what do I think about this? I'm going to go ahead and steal the same joke or analogy or comparison that hundreds of people have already put out there. This is the equivalent of Dunder Mifflin buying Michael Scott's paper company, right? Like the Live Golf Tour had no life. Like nobody watched their golf tournaments. Nobody cared. They got no ratings. It was a tour that purely existed because a bunch of rich dudes kept throwing money at it, and it wasn't sustainable. But it was enough of a pain in the ass. It was a distraction. It was a disruptor to the PGA. And it, like you said, Corey, it took a lot of marquee players off the tour, right? Like Brooks Koepka, the guy that just won the PGA championship, was not on the PGA tour. But because of goofy rules, they're allowed to compete in the majors. They're just not allowed to compete in the other events. Phil Mickelson was the ringleader of players who bailed on the PGA and joined the Live Tour. And, you know, those guys won, right? Like, they got all this money, and everybody hated on them, saying you're unprincipled hacks and this, that, and the other. And what happens? Oh, right, their tour gets bought out by the PGA, or maybe the other way around. I don't really know how it all worked. But the bottom line is the PGA caved. They put up this big, you know, pomp and circumstance about how they're too good for this, and we've got the moral high ground and this, that, and the other, and suddenly
but see, that's where I don't know if that analogy really works, because this isn't Dunder Mifflin buying the Michael Scott Paper Company. This is basically the Michael Scott Paper Company buying Dunder Mifflin.
Could be seen that way, yeah. I think that's still pretty ridiculous that it's come to this. I mean, it's just no backbone. It's what we kind of expected. It's what any cynical person would look at and say the inevitable outcome was. But it's still just a little bit unprecedented with how ridiculous this all is. I'm not a golf guy. I'm probably the clubhouse leader on this podcast in golf, which
definitely.
is pathetic because I don't watch
That's
hardly
not
any.
saying much.
I did watch a good portion of the last day of the U.S. Open this year, and I was confused for a moment as to why Phil Mickelson was in it, and then I was like, wait a second, I don't think that this is actually part of PGA, so I guess he's okay.
Yeah, the PGA doesn't regulate that of the Masters,
right.
So he was good.
It wasn't the U.S. Open, it was the Masters. But
anyway. I mean, this is a classic sports wash, right? Like this is
absolutely
buying goodwill via entertainment to kind of be a distraction from all the crap you've pulled.
It's the Qatar World Cup.
Yeah, same exact thing, Corey. And whatever happened with the Russian Olympics in Sochi as well, and Beijing in 2008, it's a part of the deal. And of course, the United States is not above this. In fact, they revel in sports washes as well.
Yep.
It's what we do. So this is not new ground for Americans who have seen this happen time and time again. But just the ridiculous show that the PGA made about this for multiple years. All for this for them to meekly just end up accepting a merger with the Live Golf Tour. It's pathetic, and I don't think there's really any other words for it. Like I'm not. It doesn't really hurt me as a non-golf fan, but I can still look at it from the perspective of a human being and say, this is just beyond the pale of cynicism and stupidity. And an absolute disregard for anything resembling moral fortitude. I mean, it's ridiculous. They put Bryson DeChambeau on TV and had him. He's being interviewed by, I think it was Aaron Burnett or maybe it was Caitlin Collins, and he basically got on there and became the Saudi spokesperson for 9/11 apologists. It was just shocking levels of stupidity. Like, this is the type of stuff you put in a time capsule and people find it after your society has collapsed and said, where can you see where society went wrong? And it's Bryson DeChambeau's dumb ass on TV talking to a reporter about 9/11 and Saudi human rights violations and how nobody's perfect, but we're all just trying to move forward and put it behind us because we're doing our best. I'm like, really? They're doing their best? How's Jamal Khashoggi's family feel about them doing their best? How's that feel?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. Evan, you want to jump in? Any thoughts?
I mean, first of all, who does the PGA think they are for a minute right now? Like, I feel like the PGA tried to frame themselves as the angelic good guys in this situation, and the Saudis from across the world are the evil bad guys, and we don't want anything to do with them. Like, well, wait a minute now, PGA. Like, your whole sport is based on excluding people for various arbitrary reasons. So whether it's their human anatomy or their skin color or whatever. So the fact that the PGA of all people is trying to stand on the moral high ground here is kind of ridiculous to me. And then, like Eric said, they caved anyway, right? That they just got all enamored by the blood money acquired from human rights violations and etc.
Well, it's just oil money.
Yeah, and etc. And now everybody makes lots of money, and it's all been sort of swept under the rug, all the bad stuff. Bryson DeChambeau doesn't sound like that bright of a guy, I must say. I have no idea who he is, but it seems like he was. I mean, this is coming from somebody who's on a podcast right now. It seemed like he was talking too much and saying stuff he probably shouldn't have been saying.
I think an adequate comparison for Bryson DeChambeau would be, I'm already forgetting his name, the dumb swimmer for U.S. Olympics.
Ryan
Lochte.
That's it. Yeah, Lochte. Yeah, he's the Ryan Lochte at golf, except I'm not sure he's actually as good at golf as Ryan Lochte was in the pool.
So at least Lochte had a quality, maybe not redeeming, but a quality.
Well, if you're into the physical appearance of men, he had to, but I'm not. So to me, he had zero because I don't really care about any swimmer other than Michael Phelps. Or Katie Ledecky. I'll give her credit too. Anybody else, forget about it. But yeah, Bryson DeChambeau is a dum-dum. He was hated on the tour before he left, and probably still will be even more so now. But also should be roundly mocked for just how dumb he is, and the fact that he put himself in a position where he had to go out there and defend Saudi Arabian terrorism.
Yeah,
that's not what you.
In any case, I think that out of all of this, some of us may have been looking at some of the players who defected from the PGA to live as, kind of the ones who looked the worst, ones with mud on their face. But I think the PGA Tour winds up actually coming out worse out of all of this as far as public appearance, certainly from my perspective, at least.
I don't fault the individual players that much for taking the money, because everybody has their price, right? If somebody's waving an obscene amount of money at you to do whatever, and they keep raising the number, at some point you're going to look around like, ooh, that would pay for a whole lot of stuff around here. And 10 times over, right? So I don't really fault those guys that much, because I can't say 100% definitively that I wouldn't have a number too, right? Hundreds of millions of dollars, just here, take it and go play some golf a little bit, right? That's enticing.
Eric's camera is kind of freezing. I don't know if his
my
his
camera's
audio
toast,
might be.
So
I don't know how his audio might be right now, but for me, I can still find a little bit of fault with the players, especially depending on how they try to. If you're trying to defend your decision, then you made a bad decision. The way I look at it is if I have a price, right? If there is an amount of money that, an amount of blood money that somebody could offer me to do something where I would say, okay, yes.
Mm-hmm.
I better be at that point, I am accepting anything that has ever been done for that entity to get that money.
Mm-hmm.
Murder, No, it's fine. I don't care.
Because you got 9/11,
9/11, not a problem at all for me. If I'm taking that money, that has to be my mentality. So
yeah.
I certainly have much less of an issue with the players getting, however much they could out of this before PGA came in. I have less of a problem now because of what PGA did, but I had a problem with the players and I have a problem with PGA. I have a problem with this whole merger.
Yeah, I can't give the players a pass for accepting the deals. I think that
money though.
Nobody's disputing that. It is a lot of money, but where the money came from, to me, is important. And because it's important to me, I am going to give the players crap for it.
Okay. I mean, I'm just saying, like, I can't sit here and say, I wouldn't take the money. How dare they take all of that money? Like, I feel like a kind of rule to live by for the most part anyway. Is you take the money.
Sure, but then
don't
give me
issues involved.
But then don't give me some BS about how we're all trying to learn from our mistakes and do better and be better. They're not trying to be better. They're not trying to learn from our mistakes. If you're going to take that money, you need to own where that money came from and basically just say, yeah, I know that's where this money came from. I just don't care.
Yeah, like you can't be a mob wife in this situation, right? Like you can't enjoy all the spoils and all the all the perks of having a whole bunch of money, but just conveniently ignore the fact that it's ill-gotten gains. So
we have to legitimately say, okay, I am. Am I not coming through?
Yeah, we hear you now.
It's weird.
Okay. We're not talking about normal people like us that work jobs where most of our paychecks go towards rent and car payments and other things. We're talking about people who are already rich, right? Like Phil Mickelson has earned more money than he could probably spend for the rest of his days. What the hell does he need more of it for to accept it from a bunch of Saudis? Like, at that point, you're only doing it purely out of greed. Like, your entire purpose is greed. You don't need another dollar for the rest of your life. Why would you accept something like that when you didn't have to? Building wealth, right? Like, that's something we talk about a lot with athletes. Phil's already done it. Brooks Koepka, already done it. He's a 4 or 5 time major champion. He's in his prime. He's earned plenty of money. Like, at what point can we say, all right, well, I wouldn't have done that because I'm already a millionaire? Because that's where we are with these guys. We're not talking about dudes who are fresh out of college, got student loan debt, right? Gotta buy their mom a new house or anything like that. They're already past that point. So why? Why go there? You're gonna make plenty of money doing golf the quote unquote right way. So just do it the right way.
Your audio is kind of like breaking in and out. We were able to hear all that. It just it's kind of distorted, and sometimes it would all of a sudden speed up or slow down. So I don't know if you want to maybe try and close Skype and then come back in, see if maybe that fixes it. But we'll go ahead and
try to just turn your camera off.
I don't think it has to do with the camera because it's audio too.
It doesn't work.
The audio should be separate.
Oh. But it's less internet juice.
That's true. Yeah, maybe it would help. He can try it. In any case, let's go ahead and now he's completely frozen. I think he just left, and he's going to try again maybe. Anyway, let's go ahead and move to Major League Baseball.
I'm still here.
Okay, cool. Yeah, now you're now you're frozen again. And now you're back. Okay. Let's talk baseball. I'll start with my Yankees. The Yankees, 3rd place in the American League East, 6th best record in all of baseball in terms of winning percentage. They are 8 games back in the division. 5-5 over the last 10. So playing kind of recently. Overcame some really horrible umpiring yesterday. I think the umpire behind the plate had like an 84% accuracy rating in terms of balls and strikes, which was one of the worst of the season.
Atrocious.
Yeah, absolutely atrocious. And it seemed, at least from my perspective, to be mostly in favor of the Mets. But the Yankees overcame a decent early few frames from Max Scherzer and then hung 5 on him in the 4th inning. Wound up winning 7-6 in the first, the second game of. No, it was the first game of that Subway Series because they didn't play on Monday. It's just a 2-game set. So they played again today. Yeah. They were off Monday. They're off again tomorrow. So 2 off days this week, which is crazy. I think that's the first time that the Yankees have had that this season. It'll happen again late next month, again when they face the Mets. But then we play our second straight weekend series against Boston. We won just one of 2 games against them in our set at home this past weekend. So now we get to go up to Boston, and we'll see how that goes. But honestly, not a whole lot of stuff that has really caught my attention over the last couple of weeks from the Yankees, except for one quote from Aaron Boone. And once again, it's Aaron Boone. It's 3 weeks ago. I was having a talk about Aaron Boone, and I'm trying to remember exactly what it was. It had to do with what was it that I was talking about a couple weeks ago with Aaron Boone?
No idea.
I guess I've already forgotten.
I'm sure it was something ridiculous. He was whining about something.
Yes, he was whining about something. Well, now he's sitting here saying, yeah, I'm as curious as you all are about Aaron Judge's injury. What kind of sense does that make? What? You're the manager. You can go down the hall and ask him, how are you feeling, man? You think that you might be days, weeks away? Like, where are we at? No, he's like, I'm just as curious as the fans. Please.
No, not. Are you the manager or aren't you?
Are you kidding me? Right, exactly. Are you the manager or not? Because if you're the manager, you better have more information than us.
You should know these things.
How do you have exactly as much information as some schmuck with a podcast in Maryland?
Mm-hmm.
That makes 0 sense.
I mean, that's a John Harbaugh quote on friggin' Lamar Jackson over the last couple of years, where he just says something.
Yeah.
Oh my
Very
God.
much so. Yeah.
Yeah, and we give John Harbaugh crap for that too. Deservedly so.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, that sounds ridiculous. What else is going on with your Yankees story? Apparently, Giancarlo Stanton is playing again. I did not know he was back from whatever injury he had.
Yeah, he's back. Stanton and LeMahieu both hit homers yesterday. Stanton's came on a pitch that hit him in the elbow. No, I'm just kidding. That was funny though. It was an edit on Instagram I sent Eric earlier. I think I sent it to you too, Evan.
Yes. Send it to me.
Yeah, and then Clay Holmes is back as well, and struck out 2 players with the bases loaded yesterday to help the Yankees hold on and win that game. So, hopefully Clay Holmes is back to where he was last year, because last year he was really good, and this year he has not been good at all. So we'll see what happens with the Yankees, but mediocre over the last 10. They're still a top 6 team in Major League Baseball. A top 4 team in the American League.
Hello, I'll keep it. Okay. That's what I was before I would head back to the other side of town.
Okay.
Okay, how's it going?
Good.
I guess that's that's coming from Evan's
Good to
end.
see you.
Yes, it is.
Like Eric, he's not muting his microphone, but
people tune in.
so we can just listen in on their conversation, or we can keep talking. So
I'm heading on now.
Yankees are 10 games above 500, but that means that there are some teams. Wow, I can't even hear myself talk.
I can't hear you either because Evan was doing something.
What did I do?
We could hear all of that, and it was like drowning me out. I couldn't even hear myself talk.
Oh. Oh no.
Yeah.
All right. Well, oops.
Anyway, Yankees are 10 games above 500. But there are 5 teams in baseball who are better than them. One of them is the Arizona Diamondbacks. They're leading the NL West, 41-26, 15 games above 500, and 3 games ahead of the Dodgers.
Mm-hmm. And 8.5 ahead of the Padres, who were a colossal disappointment all of a sudden.
I mean, what's new? The Padres have been a colossal disappointment since the second half of the season 2 years ago.
How many future Hall of Famers do they have on that team, and they still can't win? What's going on?
They made the AL or NLCS last year, though. That did happen.
That's true. They did make
Okay,
the NLCS.
well, why
They
are
were very
they
disappointing there.
32-34 in a much weaker National League?
I don't know.
Okay.
Another team that is better than the Yankees right now, the Texas Rangers. 16 games above 500. 3.5 ahead of the Houston Astros.
Wild stuff.
Wild stuff.
Won the World Series.
Yeah.
The Astros got off to a slow start, though. They had a lot of injuries. I know Bradman was out for a while. Jose Altuve got hurt in the World Baseball Classic.
They're also 4-6 in their last 10 games.
I mean,
you know who's 4 games better than them in that stretch? The Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they've won 8 of their last 10. Shohei is crushing it. But another team that is better than the Yankees right now.
The hottest team in baseball right now, let's shout them out. The Oakland Athletics have won 7 games in a row.
That's true. How have the Oakland Athletics won 7 games in a row? That means that they were 12-50, and now they're 19-50.
Yes. The hottest team in baseball. They've already beaten the Tampa Bay Rays, the best team in baseball, twice in a row.
They are actually no longer the worst team in baseball by record.
Right, because the Royals haven't won any games in like a week and a half.
Yeah, they're 1-9
They've
in
lost
their last 10.
8 in a row.
Yeah. Detroit also 1-9 in their last 10. Yikes. But one of the other teams, and also the New York Mets 1-9 in their last 10. But I digress.
Jeez.
Another team better than the Yankees. Your Baltimore Orioles, Eric and Evan. They are the second best team in baseball, in fact. And yet 4 games behind the Tampa Bay Rays still. Are you guys...
Only 4 games.
Are you guys for getting rid of divisions at this point?
Are we what? You cut out.
Are you guys for getting rid of divisions at this point?
I mean, I don't really care, but I guess. I don't know. I don't think it matters that much. I mean, for me right now as an Orioles fan, to see them win games is really all I could ask for, because my whole life they've been hot garbage.
Second longest active winning streak in baseball, by the way.
Yeah. Behind the A's. Of all teams. Yeah. It's just fun to watch these Orioles play. They're exciting. They're a little too exciting for my liking, out of the bullpen in particular. But, got a lot of young talent.
And you also have some old talent, because perhaps a big part of this success, recently at least, has been Aaron Hicks.
Your boy,
What?
Aaron Hicks.
Aaron Hicks goes down to Baltimore and all of a sudden remembers how to hit. He's batting almost 350 in the last 11 games. He's got 5 extra base hits. He has more walks than strikeouts. His OPS is over 1,100.
Yeah, apparently.
Did you guys give him some steroids or something? What happened?
Yeah, he said something along the lines of, it was, it took a lot of pressure off of him not to play in New York anymore.
Oh, jeez.
So, that's, yeah. So, I mean, that's what you get when you play for the Yankees. That is inherent to it, right? They don't get 50,000 people at every game for no reason. So
what? Eli Manning would have won more Super Bowls than Tom Brady if he just stayed in San Diego. Is that where we're at now?
Well, I doubt it, because the Chargers are kind of a mess. But it's hard to win in New York. It's hard, but yeah, I'm glad he's found some relief and found the foul pole last night, a doink off the foul pole for a home run. So it's been shocking to me because I thought he was a bum. Right, I was so irritated when the Orioles signed him. Like he can't play. Why are we signing this guy? Right? We don't need more players who suck. But no, he's been a revelation, particularly in light of Cedric Mullins' injury. At Hicks playing center field.
There you go.
He's been pretty good out there.
Now, who else has also been really good, particularly in this active 5-game winning streak the Orioles are on? Gunnar Henderson.
Yes, indeed. Reigning American League Player of the Week. In his last 5 games, he's had 12 hits, 2 stolen bases, a solo, 2-run, 3-run, and grand slam
Home
runs.
Like so every kind of home run you can have.
A home run cycle. And the Orioles are 5-0 in those 5 games. And per Opta Stats, who I've never heard of, he's the first Major League Baseball player ever to accomplish this. And they've been playing Major League Baseball since 1869.
So which part of that is he the first ever to do? Is it the home run cycle in 5 games, or is it the home run cycle with 2 stolen bases and 5?
All of those things, right? 5 games, 12 hits, 2 stolen bases, the home run cycle, and 5 wins.
So this is a Tim Kirchin stat.
Very much so, yes.
Absolutely. Of course.
Yeah, so he's batting .571. Walked and 4 strikeouts. He's been incredible. He was struggling all year, but he was struggling to the untrained eye though, because he was swinging and missing, but he was also seemed like he would get rung up on pitches that were just the filthiest filth you'll ever see, right? Some sort of screwball-looking thing that just nips the corner for strike 3. It always seemed like that happened to Gunnar. When he did hit the ball well, it seemed like it got, winded down or right into somebody's glove or something like that. So, it's kind of turned around for him. The entire season, he was, swinging at strikes and taking his walks, still being a good contributor despite, hitting under 200 for a good bit of the season. So, he's doing what we know he's capable of doing.
So, Evan, I got to ask you, how many of those 5 games was Gunnar Henderson in your fantasy baseball lineup?
I don't know, maybe half of them.
Half of 5 is 2.5. So is it 2 or 3?
I'm hoping 3, but probably 2.
Not enough of them to beat me, because Gunnar was trying to carry Evan to a win, but
what carried me to a loss was Bryce Elder and some other pitcher I picked up who were pitching against the Nationals and the A's respectively, and both got toasted.
The correct answer was 2.
Meanwhile, my pitchers dominated, so I just suddenly I went into Saturday night thinking, okay, I'm screwed. And then I suddenly pop open the phone sometime mid-afternoon Sunday, and I'm like, oh, I'm winning, and it's basically over. Cool.
Yeah, unbelievable. And of course, Gunnar has negative points tonight, so he's 0 for 2.
It's something, again, Evan, you kind of alluded to it, but even as Gunnar struggled through the first 2 months of the season, his OPS never wavered below 700. It was consistently at least around league average, even when he was batting 180, 190, and striking out in 30% of his at-bats, because he was drawing those walks, and when he did hit the ball, he was hitting the ball for extra base hits or home runs, things like that. So that kind of, like you said, kept his value to the point where we weren't saying, okay, maybe we need to consider not playing him anymore because he's costing the team, because he wasn't costing the team. He was providing some level of value, and now he's providing a ton of it. So glad to see him come around.
I will give Evan credit. So he only started him in 2 of those 5 games, But in the 2 games that he started Gunnar Henderson, he scored 10.5 points. In the 3 games that he was left on the bench, he scored 9.75. So he at least got more than half of the points that Gunnar had available in those 5 games.
Oh, okay. Well,
I'm sure that does a lot for Evans.
do I get a cookie or something?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, but you can pat yourself on the back if you'd like.
Oh, I'm not going to.
Okay. Anything else on the Orioles?
Adley Rutschman is leading all of the American League catchers in All-Star voting.
He's been very good. I think
Yes.
that's deserved. I mean, who else in the American League would you put above him right now?
The guy who's next in the voting is Jonah Heim of the Rangers.
He's been strong, but
Yeah. Apparently former Oriole farmhand.
interesting.
Yeah. So, good for Adley. I mean, I feel anyway, as soon as Adley signed his contract, he was the best catcher in professional baseball. Defensively, right? Like, as soon as that check cleared, once he was officially a professional, he's been the best guy. So, I don't want to say this was expected, but, you're picked 1-1. Hopefully you get to be an all-star at some point, right?
One would hope.
Yeah. Yeah. So Jackson Holiday, also picked 1-1, has been mashing just everywhere. Aberdeen, Delmarva.
I got
Corey's the only
to
one
see
who's seen
him
him play.
I got to see him in Delmarva.
Oh, nice. Danny Ocean.
Yeah.
Okay.
Still hasn't made it up to AA. Otherwise, I would have seen him last week or the week before when I went to see the Bay Sox.
Yeah. We need to get out to a Bay Sox game and have another outing.
Bay Sox games are fun. I went on Star Wars night. It was cool.
Oh, okay.
Nice.
I went to a Yankees game on Star Wars night in New York. I have a Jedi Judge bobblehead that's in storage right now.
I was very confused by the Bay Sox blue uniforms, but it was because they were R2-D2 uniforms. It took me a little while to recognize that.
Oh, you're the Star Wars guy.
I am. Still threw me off.
Oh, okay.
Sloppy.
Yeah. Ryan Mountcastle is dealing with some sort of vertigo symptoms. So hopefully that explains why he can't hit all of a sudden. Eric, I want to say just you and I, or maybe you and me and Sean were at the game when Mountcastle hit a grand slam and a 3-run home run. He was just crushing it and, driving in all the runs and hitting bombs and apple tacos and everything. And then all of a sudden it just disappeared. Like he just couldn't baseball anymore. So hopefully.
I mean, let's keep it real. Ryan Mountcastle hasn't hit consistently well since 2021. Right?
Well, yeah.
I mean, it's a problem. It's a serious problem. Obviously, you hope he gets healthy, figures out what's going on. Maybe he needs to come down here and ride Fury a few times to get his vertigo straightened out. I don't know.
Oh, jeez.
That
sounds fun.
That might make it worse. But I obviously hope that he gets back and he can contribute to this team because this team's a whole heck of a lot of fun. And Ryan Mountcastle was one of the guys that was stuck on the crappy teams, and it would be nice if he could be a part of one of the teams that's being really fun. So
yeah. And then also Austin Voth is dealing with elbow discomfort.
Is this a pothole situation?
It sure sounds like one. So for those who are unfamiliar, let's say back in 2014, 15, 16, somewhere in there, Ubaldo Jimenez, who got paid a whole bunch of money, was absolutely terrible. Suddenly landed on the injured list because he rolled his ankle in a pothole in the parking lot in front of his apartment.
Ooh.
So everybody on Twitter was like, "Yeah, that's made up." He was just pitching so terribly, you had to do something about it, and you couldn't send him down or cut him, so you put him on the injured list with this phantom injury. So it seems like that may have happened to Voth as well. But whenever there's elbow discomfort, with a pitcher that's sounds more serious than joking about somebody maybe falling in a pothole in the parking lot.
Yeah. Okay. So is that about it on the Orioles?
Yeah, I think so.
Yup.
Do they have any hits tonight? No. And the Blue Jays just scored. So,
All right.
oh, somebody's on base. That's different.
Well, I think that about does it then. We don't have anything else on our sheets. Do we have any late breaking news? Any Woj bombs?
I haven't seen anything. We'll talk about that next week anyway.
Okay.
George Springer hit a home run
Ah,
on my bench, of course.
yeah. I started. Was it Chris Bassett yesterday who got rocked?
Yikes!
Yeah.
Oh, no.
That left me unhappy yesterday. My fantasy team has
MVP.
1.75 points after 2 days. Not great. Not great. But still, I think I'm a little bit less frustrated than Eric with his relief pitchers.
Dude, I hadn't even seen that until you said something, and I was like, oh, my team's sucking against Sam again. What a surprise. I never beat him. I think I've beaten him once in the last 3 years.
I'll have to take a look, but yeah, it's good enough. All right, well, that pretty much wraps up the show then. So this was episode 241. As we said, we had a couple weeks off. We're going to wind up with a lot fewer episodes than we typically do in a season. Usually we get like 50-ish episodes in a year. I don't think we're going to quite hit 50 before the year turns over for us, but
Already missed like 3 weeks since the draft. So
at least.
there aren't enough
And we
weeks
missed a
to
few
do
before that too. So, but we have not gone anywhere. We are still going to be pumping out content.
Don't hate each other.
Yeah, we do not hate
Yeah.
each other. Still good buddies. Just schedules get crazier as life happens, and this isn't something that we're paid to do. We don't make any money from this.
We lose money.
Right, we technically lose money from this. So, when other things get in the way schedule wise, we got to prioritize other things from time to time. But we're still going to get together every week as much as we can anyway, and continue to put this show out there. So, liking the podcast on whatever platform you're listening to it on. If you're listening live on YouTube, hit that like button, hit the subscribe buttons. You can hit the bell to turn notifications on so you know when we're going live. You can follow us on Twitter at SportsBallers18. We always post at least the day of that we are going to be going live, so you always know that is our plan. You can like us on Facebook as well, so that, we post there. You can like our podcast on whatever platform you're listening to it. If you're not listening live, maybe you're listening on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, or Google, wherever you're listening to us, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, so we know that you're out there. You can also follow us individually on Twitter if you're so inclined. I'm at Corey Puffett, Eric is at Quagmire67, and Evan is at Evan_Ash13. Next week, Eric will be hosting, and so I'm sure that we will get a healthy dose of early NBA offseason news, where we think that some notable free agents may be headed, or at least talking about who the notable free agents are and what they might bring to teams that are looking to fill that sort of a role. So
draft is next Thursday too, so that's going to be a thing as well.
Yeah, there is that. So definitely be sure to tune in next week when we are back on the air. You can email us, thesportsballers@gmail.com, if you have any mailbag questions you'd like to throw our way. We're always happy to take some off the beaten path topics. Obviously, golf, not a topic that most of us would normally talk about. We probably would have discussed it at least briefly, just because it was probably the most significant sports news outside of the championships that were being played in the last couple of weeks. But definitely love to to have some people throwing questions our way. It just adds a little bit more to the show and allows for some things that maybe wouldn't have caught our attention to definitely get into our show notes. So I think that is it. Any shout outs this week from you guys? I'll start with Evan.
I mean, shout out to Eric for doing all the driving on our, quarter cross-country road trip to Kings Island, Cedar Point, and Holiday World. Shout out to all of the workers at all of those places, again, for putting up with us. Shout out to the Buzzed Bars crew. Y'all are something else. And it's just delightful, to say the very least. So yeah, those are my shout-outs.
All right, Eric.
All right, well, shout out to Carrick from Coaster Hour, Evan, ya boy. He was
right.
at Hollywood Nights as well. And you didn't tell him about our podcast. I keep telling you, tell Carrick from Coaster Hour about our podcast, but God forbid, Evan bothered to do any self-promotion with his semi-famous YouTube friend. But yeah, shout out to him.
Subscribers.
Yeah, shout out to him and his pops. They were at the Hollywood Nights event. Seemed like they were having a good time, just like we were. And shout out, my original shout out was shout out to Neil Everett. I'm going to maybe slam my head into the desk if Corey says he doesn't know who Neil Everett is. Corey, you know who Neil Everett is, right?
I see a blank stare.
No, I don't.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Oh, no. Neil Everett is one of the most prominent SportsCenter anchors that has been on the air for the last basically 30 years. Corey, you'd probably recognize him if you saw him.
I'm sure I would recognize his face. I just don't know him by name.
Well, he is stepping away from ESPN after a lengthy stint there. One of the funnier and more engaging SportsCenter anchors that they've had. Usually worked with Stan Verrett, who was also great. That is a shame that duo will be broken up at this point. Neil Everett had one of the funnier This Is SportsCenter commercials. He was sitting with Roger Federer. I'm sure Evan has seen this, maybe Corey has too. And they were discussing how tennis has their world ranking system. And Neil Everett basically asked Roger Federer, so, well, for SportsCenter anchors, go ahead and where would you rank me 1 through 10? And Federer kind of sheepishly says, I don't know if you'd be in the top 10. And Neil Everett responds, kind of stares at him. He says, I'm in the top 10, Roger. And he's absolutely right. Neil Everett always in the top 10 for SportsCenter anchors, and he's going to be missed on the late night SportsCenter. He was fantastic, and I wish him luck on his next endeavors.
Yeah, I haven't been
I just looked him up. I do
Sports
recognize him.
Yeah.
I feel like I haven't really seen him on ESPN in quite a while, though. Like, I guess he's just not on at the same time that I'm watching.
You certainly stay up late enough to see. So like I haven't been watching late night sports centers because I'm old and need to go to bed. So that's what's been going on with that.
Okay.
But yeah, wishing him all the best. And when he was on Sports Center that I did see, he was great on there. And him and Stan were a great pair as well.
All right. I don't have any sports shout-outs this week, so I guess my only shout-out is to my parents. Hosted my wife and I this past weekend. We went out and spent a couple of nights with them on the Eastern Shore. Went to Easton Bowl, which is on my mind right now because I went outside for just a little walk today to enjoy some fresh air, and I saw a guy sitting by Denizens wearing an Easton Bowl shirt. I was like, oh, wow, interesting. Far from work, assuming that's where he works. I don't know why somebody would wear an Easton Bowl shirt otherwise, but yeah, it's been a while since I've been bowling. It was fun. I didn't bowl particularly well. But yeah, so shout out to them. So that'll do it for episode 241. Tune in next week. Eric will have the con, and until then, stay safe.